Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Vesperisms, the art of thinking for yourself. I'm your host, author-illustrator Vesper Stamper, and this is supposed to be my weekly 15-minute recalibration of your artistic worldview. So grab your coffee or your beverage of choice, have a seat here in my studio, and let's have a chat. This is episode 12, Rehumanize. I'm coming to you after a bit of an unintentional hiatus here on Vesperisms because I'm in the middle of drafting my new novel about the Berlin Wall. And I always forget how intense the beginning of the novel writing process really is. You can see behind me, if you're watching the YouTube video, my wall of Post-its, which I've covered up with paintings in an attempt to bring some order out of the chaos. But regardless of the frequency of the podcasts, do remember that I am a working artist. I'm not a professional podcaster, but I've been consistently hearing from listeners how this podcast, even the previous episodes, are helping them stay grounded amidst all of the noise and the shouting and the demands for polarization and names on lists and heads on spikes. I'm also coming to you as someone who is often on the verge of tears these days. I don't really know how to get us out of this moment. As much as I look through history, as much as I try to understand and wrestle with the past, I don't really know what to do when literally half my country thinks the other half is evil. We're not talking about some minority party, like the Nazi party in the 1920s. We're talking about literally half and half. The best that I can come up with right now to understand is that a clue is to watch for self-righteousness combined with vengeance. The demand that one align or denounce or else. Those voices must be rejected out of hand. And you know what? As an author of historical fiction, I can say there may be partial truth in the outcries. Some evil may indeed be afoot. But what's truth and what's hype? It's confusing. How much is true because it's true, and how much has been manipulated messaging, forcing you to declare an alliance on one side or another? So if you've been following some of my personal philosophy through Vesperisms or on Instagram, or especially through my books, you know that I find the political worldview, while it's obviously powerful, to be the most low-resolution way to view both the world and other people. Instead, I hold to this value of loving your neighbor so that maybe you might be able to see your way toward loving your enemy with some practice. This kind of love is something that has to be intentionally chosen. It's not something that comes naturally to anybody. I don't care how nice you are. It's not the same as being nice. In fact, sometimes it's the opposite of being nice or of going along to get along. Sometimes love means not letting your neighbor get away with self-delusion. If you've ever loved someone with mental illness, you learn that the healthiest thing you can do, the most loving thing, for both yourself and that person is to refuse to indulge their distortions of reality. And one of the true illnesses that is coming over our societies is the distortion of each other's humanity through the greasy lens of politics. If you've been finding value in what I'm doing here on Vesperisms, I'd like to introduce you to a hashtag that I suggest we start using. Hashtag Rehumanize. Everywhere we see evidence of dehumanization, and in fact, your device will probably want to autocorrect the word rehumanize to dehumanize. Just this week, for example, I saw prominent journalists in major publications talk about their desire to see political opponents hurt and suffer. I saw several prominent politicians talk about creating lists for revenge against their political enemies. I saw several fellow artists stand their ground when they were called out for rage and demonization. I'm talking about artists who, just like me, create work for children, who know that they have children following their feeds. This kind of rhetoric doesn't just polarize, it drives people underground. We must, as artists and citizens, resist this dehumanization with all of our might. We must intentionally and proactively rehumanize. This comes from my belief that when art is properly oriented, it is human-centered. This means that we can create from within a human body and that we create for other humans. We do not create out of self-hatred, and we do not create for spectral beings like abstractions or caricatures. Look, it's fine. Let me offer a caveat. Let that be part of your sketch phase. It's fine. Get it out of your system in some sketchbook or journal or in the privacy of an empty dance studio or rehearsal space, something that will never see the light of day. It's only for you. It's just part of your process. Dance it out. Blast it out. Get your rage down however you need to. But then, you better collect yourself and you better rehumanize. All of us have this rage and anger. We want people to suffer who hurt us, but we can't indulge it. My friend Will Ford III, who you may remember from our awesome interview a few episodes back, he often asks this question: what storyline do you want to be a part of? The healing or the hurt? The blessing or the curse? This is an important question, especially for artists. Artists are by nature storytellers. Whether you're telling a story through a novel or through a Dvorak concerto or a color field painting, we're telling a story about the world we see. When we forget about the human-centered aspect of our work, when we create out of displaced utopian rage, we create caricatures. Simply put, we make bad art. We make propaganda. The opportunities to make propaganda are legion. There will always be a market for the easy and the cheap. There will always be the pressure to conform. But remember, artists, you do not live in this paradigm of the easy, the cheap, and the conformist. Let me take a minute to talk about conformity. My husband and I just watched a great documentary the other night called Hype about the grunge music scene in Seattle in the 90s. It's a great documentary. I was simultaneously filled with this emotion of elation that I came of age at that time of free expression. It was before the internet made shells out of us. It was a time of experimentation. It was a time of anti-censorship. It was a time before pocket devices stole all of our glorious boredom, a time when you could bash it out with your friends in a garage. And that's exactly why it made me grieve. Because once social media came onto the scene, once the 24-hour news cycle came onto the scene, once interests coalesced into these binary choices, these binary camps that were given and told that we must participate in and align with, artists got sucked right out of the margins where we belong and shoved into tight boxes. Listen, being nonconformist, being an artist, has absolutely zero to do with how you dress or do your hair or how many tattoos you have. It has nothing to do with making shock art or glorifying ugliness or being sexually subversive. These things now are so mainstream as to be mind-numbingly boring, okay? No one's impressed anymore. Here's a memo. No one is impressed. Being nonconformist and subversive is about knowing who and what you are. You, artist, have a very specific and important role in the world that you must not sell out. Do not let them put baby in a corner. Don't you dare believe the hype for 1 minute that you have to subscribe to these cheap, low-resolution political camps. You do not. You put your thinking cap back on, and you get right back out on the margin where you belong. You live outside the camp, okay? That's your only way to have proper perspective. Remember another tenet of Vesperisms. Artists see. We are meant to be witnesses to our world, in both how we see and what we portray. But how in the world can you see properly if your every way of perceiving the world, all of that glorious sensory perception and discernment, is being injected into you from outside? If everything is right up in your face, if every voice is shouting in your ears, if your hands and your feet are tethered to fetters you were never meant to wear. Are artists exalted beings? No, I say it all the time. We are not special, but we have a specific role to play. We are witnesses. We are humans called to rehumanize both ourselves and others, to call ourselves and others back to reality. That is true resistance. Resistance isn't alignment with party or candidate. Resistance is saying no to manipulation that wants all of us to crawl on our bellies. Resistance is recovering your individual, not your group, your individual identity, dignity, and beauty. Resistance is rehumanizing, re-souling, re-spiritizing. Thanks for joining me for this week's Vesperisms. What do you think about what I'm saying? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you want to add some nuance? That's great. Post your thoughts and use the hashtag Rehumanize. On Instagram only. That's the only thing I'll say. I will not go anywhere near Twitter. So if you hashtag Rehumanize on Twitter, that's fine, but I won't see it. Whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, would you please subscribe to Vesperisms now and leave me a 5-star review and like this episode? You know, all the things you're supposed to do. That will help others to find this podcast and spread this message of an artistic worldview to more people. You can find my books wherever you love to buy books, especially through your local independent bookstores who this year, above all years, would love your support. And especially with the holidays coming up, my books are aimed at being heirlooms, and they make great, reasonably priced gifts. So pick up a bunch of them. Why not? I create illustrated novels of historical fiction for young adults of all ages. It would especially mean a lot if you would leave my latest book, A Cloud of Outrageous Blue, a 5-star review on Amazon. This has been a really tricky year for authors, and I write books aimed at this value of rehumanization and understanding one's place in this crazy story of history that we are actively living in right now. Please consider helping me do this work by purchasing my books. If you want to stay in touch, the best place to follow me right now is Instagram at Vesper-illustration, and to subscribe to my newsletter at vesperillustration.com. You'll get news about my work. You'll get even a free outtake chapter from my newest book, A Cloud of Outrageous Blue. Music, as always, is provided by Ben Vesper, and that's my band. Fellow artist, fellow creative, fellow maker, fellow human. I want you to remember something. Your voice is important. Your contribution matters to this world, now more than ever. And just remember, work isn't everything, but everything is the work. See you next time.